Hi, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. It's been a great conversation so far today. We at Fidelity are on a journey toward continuous delivery. We're not there yet. We've achieved small pockets of success. And my main goal today is to share with you our journey, the factors, the considerations, the challenges, and some of the strategic approaches that we're taking on our journey toward continuous delivery. So Andre already mentioned, I do have a development background. I started out as a developer, but I was always the one on the team that was interested in more than just the development. I ended up doing a lot of the packaging and the writing the installation scripts with the checksums, things like that. So from the beginning, I always had kind of a release engineering mindset, even before there was a term, release engineer. I worked for a consulting company pretty much straight out of college, based in Chicago, and I worked on some pretty big projects at a lot of large Fortune 500 companies, and it gave me an opportunity to see a lot of technologies and a lot of different cultural environments and a lot of approaches toward development. So I think that was a great introduction to IT. I went to Iron Mountain Records Management Company, and again there, I think I started when there were 15 people in IT. They're a huge company now. They're in major acquisition mode. I was doing everything from development, release engineering, network. I was even doing operations, so I wore many hats there. Again, that gave me a great rounded introduction to IT. From there, I went to John Hancock. I was brought in to help implement ClearCase. ClearCase had already found its way into Hancock, but they wanted to roll it out as a standard across the enterprise, so I was on that team. Ended up becoming the lead of that team, and then ended up becoming the lead of all the SDLC tools within the life insurance. Now I'm at Fidelity Investments. I'm exactly where I want to be. I'm at center. I'm involved in all things ALM. I'm in the corporate enterprise discussion around Agile and Kanban and continuous delivery and DevOps, so I'm exactly where I want to be. So Fidelity, for those that don't know, founded nearly 70 years ago. We're one of the largest mutual fund companies, financial services group. We've got 40,000 employees worldwide, 10,000 in IT alone. So it's a huge IT organization. We have, unbelievably, over 40 business units, but we have, what I would say 8 major business units. And these are really the revenue generating business units. And they have the wherewithal, the budget, the ego, in some cases to stand up their own ALM teams, their own ALM tool instances. Whereas, I work at Center, so my group is responsible for providing enterprise solutions for the enterprise at large. The only point I want to make here is some of the business units, especially some of the key ones, do decide to go off on their own in certain areas. So this is just a little bit more about Fidelity. So there's been a lot of change in our industry over the last 10 years. We've all heard, the warning signs. Prepare for cloud, prepare for mobile, prepare for globally distributed. And all the point I'm trying to make here is Fidelity has it all. Yes, we have globally distributed development. Yes, we have mobile development. last year alone, we saw an increase of 66% in mobile transactions occurring in our mobile apps. Our mobile apps were downloaded over 1 million times last year. And yes, we have cloud. We do have limited usage of external public cloud services. Fidelity is a very conservative company. We're very protective of our image and of our brand. So we're very leery of using external cloud offerings. In cases where there's a very stringent external security review process that has to be followed. So what we've done is we've established an internal cloud. We call it Click to Compute, and it leverages OpenStack, Heat, a lot of the open technologies that the external cloud offerings leverage. So I can go to a portal. I can, from a limited number of configurations, like two CPUs by 4 gig RAM, 4 CPUs by 8 gig RAM. I can pick from a couple of configurations. I can pick from a standard set of OSs, like Oracle, OEL, Windows 2008, a limited number of OS configurations, and then there's a standard set of recipes, chef recipes, that I can pick, like Tomcat, WebSphere, some different versions of JDKs or JREs. Click submit, and within 5 minutes I can have a VM, a server. So that has done amazing things to propel not only CI within our firm, but testing, because one of the limitations of really seeing CI catch on and testing catch on is the unavailability of environments, of servers. So our internal cloud has done a lot to propel forward those objectives. So I would say our journey began around 2005. We launched a program internally called IT Transformation. And it was launched from center. So it was really a push model where we were taking the enterprise through what I would call enlightenment and education, where it was our role, our responsibility to introduce these concepts and get everyone talking and thinking and taking steps towards adopting these methodologies and these principles. But Kaizen comes out of Japan, Toyota, the manufacturing industry, and it's all about just in time. Our CEO is very much a believer in Kaizen. It has a lot to do with lean principles. That led to Agile. So as part of IT transformation, we looked for Agile planning tools. We started rolling out Agile planning. And we also introduced something that I think is key, which is called product model. At Fidelity, we have over 4,000 applications. And even the tool instances, we consider those applications. So we have a registry of all of our applications, and in that registry, it records what the technology stack is associated with that application, who the key contacts are, a little bit about the app, but most importantly is it provides a hierarchy, a way to roll up apps, because you just can't scale a rollout of concepts and principles and methodologies out to 4,000 different app teams or development teams. You need to find a way to roll those apps up and deal at a higher level. So what we did is we came up with product model. At the top, we established what are called product lines. We have about 300 of those. Within product lines, we have products. And then within products, we have individual applications. So for example, my product is called ALM, Application Lifecycle Management. Within, and we roll up to a product line called Application Lifecycle Management and Methodology. We're two sister teams. We are trying to marry methodology to tools. We're organizationally aligned. We work closely together. As we roll out new tools, we work to map the methodologies into the tools. So within our ALM product, we have about 23 applications, 23 tools. Some of them have been around for a while, and others like CloudBees, Jenkins are newer to our product. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is it gives you a way of talking at a product team level. And we've tried to encourage this concept of establishing persistent product teams and addressing things at a product level so that you get the cross-training of skill sets across product. You understand what your gaps are, what your needs are. So instead of having individual teams coming at us, the ALM tool team, saying we want to use this tool or that tool, when that occurs, we push right back to them and say, you know, you really need to decide at a product level what you're going to be using for tools and what type of training you need. So it has allowed us to raise the conversation up to a level that's more scalable. Kanban has already been talked about. We are also finding Kanban useful. In our case, it's more the operations teams, the infrastructure teams that are finding Kanban especially useful. These are the teams that are constantly dealing with shifts in priority. One thing that I didn't hear mentioned earlier is yes, we know that Kanban, one of its goals is to limit work in progress, but why? There's a very good theory out there called the theory of constraints. And it simply says that the more you try to take on, the actual less productive you get. And there's actually a formula, and it's kind of a exponential formula. You know, so the average person can do 3 things somewhat well, but you give them 5 and their productivity drops by a significant amount. You give them 7 and their productivity drops by an even exponentially more significantly amount. So Kanban, we're trying to roll that out within our infrastructure and operations support teams. Agile at scale is something that we're dealing with or trying to address now. Is we've got pockets where Agile is working very well. You know, we've got grassroots support of Agile. We have top management support of Agile, but oftentimes this middle management layer, it's been referred to as the permafrost layer. You know, they're the ones where it really matters. You've got to get through to them. And Agile at scale or scaled Agile framework, that's trying to get through to that level. These are the managers that have the business breathing down their back. You know, they have to deliver, and we're coming at them with all of these concepts and methodologies, and some of them are just, you know, get out of my face, I have real business to do. And DevOps is you know, we know that DevOps is to bridge the chasm between development and operations. In my own opinion, I think DevOps is something that you have to address on your journey to continuous delivery. It's funny, we started talking about DevOps about a year ago at Fidelity, and we started at what was called the DevOps Working Group. And I can remember one of our first meetings, everyone is saying, well, let's not talk about tools. Let's leave this tool agnostic. And I'm the one in the room saying, well, you know, at some point, folks, we have to start talking about tools, because DevOps is all about establishing consistent processes all the way from beginning to end. You know, we want to get out of the business of doing things one way in development, a different way for QA environments, and yet a different way for operations environments. And I use the term FOBO. You've heard of FUBU, for us, by us. Well, operations teams often develop their own deployment processings, you know, for operations by operations, and we see that at Fidelity. And so, you know, you've got to at some point start talking about a tool that will enable you to establish a consistent deployment process from the beginning to the end, so that by the time you get to production, you've tested your deployment process 100 times. But I can remember in one conversation, the developer actually saying, well, you know, we wrote our shell scripts and they SCP the WAR file out to our server, and, you know, they bounce Tomcat, and I don't really care how operations gets into production. And I had to say, you know, this is a DevOps working group. You know, this is the exact type of mentality that we're trying to address. You know, we're trying to come up with solutions that will work across the divide. So another thing that we're approaching on our journey is platform as a service internally. I've already mentioned the cloud. We're looking, you know, to drive the provisioning of environments within that cloud. You know, the cataloging of environments to applications. Another thing, one aspect of platform as a service is ALM. ALM is really utilities, development utilities. So what I'm driving is how ALM fits into platform as a service. So I'll talk about a little bit more about that later. We have a forum at Fidelity called the GAF, the Global Architecture Forum. I've been an architect for 2 years, so I've attended the last 2 forums. We converge each spring in Boston at headquarters. And, you know, there's a lot of smart people at Fidelity. There's a lot of people thinking about things. Some of our past themes have been, you know, crowdsourcing, design thinking. But what was interesting this year, and it made me kind of proud of my contribution to the conversation, is the last 2 bullets. I can't tell you how many times I heard the word standards and preferred ALM tools. I think, so we're going through a period of enlightenment. We're going through a period of awakening. We're kind of looking in our rearview mirror and we're saying, you know, maybe we need to standardize on an acceptable, supportable, integratable number of tools. And maybe, you know, the influx of all the tools that have occurred over the last 10 years, maybe that wasn't really innovation. Maybe that was actually kind of hindering innovation from occurring at the levels innovation should be occurring. So another theme was, you know, we've got to develop for the cloud. We've got to focus on web services, better application design, data services. So some more factors that are in play here. You know, there's been a pretty strong backlash against the heavyweight mandated, what I would call the legacy waterfall tools. And I've actually, when I became an architect 2 years ago, I started going door to door across our major BUs and having conversations that I feel really need to be had with my counterparts across the enterprise. And by my counterparts, what I mean are these other ALM tools across the larger business units. You know, remember earlier I said some of the bigger business units have stood up their own ALM tools, their own instances. So I know them all. We meet fairly regularly. We talk almost constantly. So there's a lot more synergy, I think, that's ever been in play. A lot of these folks were so busy running what I would call their inefficient, antiquated SCM factories, you know, with their blinders on, that they couldn't even consider some of the newer tools and newer methodologies. So my goal was to kind of break through that wall and point out some things that I think were undeniable. You know, there was a grassroots influx happening whether we wanted to admit it or not. Developers were bringing in some of these tools, you know, behind the scenes, installing them on desktops under their desks. You know, so instances of Jenkins, instances of Git were creeping into our environment, whether we liked it or were aware of it or not. And so what I was trying to do is change the conversation to, you know, we've got to get our arms around this. We've got to get our heads around this and figure out a way to address this influx in a more controlled, managed manner, or we're going to become irrelevant. You know, we're going to be stamped irrelevant and pushed aside. So developers, they're smart, right? I used to be a developer. Yeah, you know, they're lazy, but you know, what I would say is developers, it's not so much that they're lazy, but they're not always thinking about repeatability and high availability and you know, access appropriate to role and all the things that we in the heavily financially regulated industry have to think about. You know, the things that auditors care about. So developers want, believe it or not, they do want the traceability. They want to be able to see, you know, what code changes are tied to which stories they're working on, and then what builds are associated with those codes, and what artifacts were associated with those builds. So they absolutely want to see that. It makes them more efficient. It makes them be able to do their job faster and answer the questions more readily, rather than spending half of their day digging for information. Another factor is internal social. We stood up an internal social site called Ribbit. For those that may not know it, our logo is a frog, a green frog. So we stood up an internal social site called Ribbit, and there was a group that was created called Kill Clear Case. And hundreds of people joined this group. And if you go in and you just read the thread, I mean, it's just, you know, it's done a lot to advance the conversation internally. So more people are involved in the conversation. The conversation is getting involvement at more levels than ever before. And lastly, another factor is, you know, we want to hire the best. We want to hire the brightest. But what we were finding is college grads are, you know, coming out saying, what is ClearCase? You know, what is Build Forge? So Meanwhile, we've got people that have made entire careers out of being ClearCase admins, and then we have college grads saying, what is ClearCase? So there's a far gap. How do you address that? So our role, I already mentioned we're the IT Enablement Center, is, we're change agents in the enterprise. We often connect the dots. When we hear about one business unit doing something that another business is starting, we try to connect those dots. I go door to door. I talk with my counterparts. I talk with development architects. I find out what their needs are, what their thoughts are, where they're heading. Look for opportunities to establish partnerships. If two or more business units bring in the same tool, that automatically, by our rules, qualifies that tool to become centrally managed and centrally hosted. So, we also challenge the status quo. I'm trying to change the dialogue. We try to lead by example, so the ALM service offerings that we put out there, we're trying to lead by example. And CloudBees, Jenkins is one of them. Another one is Atlassian Stash. Our sister team, the methodology team, they're all about promoting best practices. We have an internal website called itech.fmr.com, and on that website are practices around continuous integration, continuous build, everything, test-driven development, everything. I already mentioned we provide the common ALM offerings, and whether the business units choose to leverage them or not, it's up to them. They pay for them, regardless of whether they leverage them. So if they stand up their own internal instances, they're actually paying twice, because we're enterprise, we're overhead, our costs are charged back to the revenue-generating business units. So my argument to them is you really should consider using us. Everyone is scared to death of the word centralized. So what I've been trying to say is, they're shared common infrastructures. We're working towards a two-tier support model. My team cannot possibly scale to deal with every single development team across Fidelity. So we absolutely rely on a two-tier support model whereby we provide the ALM platform. We'll support, of course, the ALM tool, do all the patching, the integrations, the plugins, but we rely on the business units to provide the administration of their piece of the pie. So I'm going to get into a little bit later of what types of factors we look for in ALM tools. So really, by and large, our strategy has been to rationalize the ALM tools, to look at the tools and either label them legacy or label them CD. So legacy tools are the tools that we really don't see helping us achieve CD. CD tools are the tools that we see taking us into the future towards continuous delivery. And again, I'm going to share with you a little bit later what we think CD tools are. We've basically proposed 3 ALM stacks, and we call them the preferred tool stacks. And we're seeing a lot of buy-in towards these stacks because we think you're not going to find a magic bullet stack. You're not going to find one stack that addresses everything. So what we've come up with is we have a predominantly rational stack, and that would be the IBM CLM offering, which is RTC, RRC, RQM. And that's all around planning, source control, and build and test. Then we have our predominantly open source stack, which introduces Git, and we've chosen Atlassian Stash. It introduces Jenkins, and we've chosen CloudBees Jenkins. And within that OSS stack, we don't care what planning tool you use. We offer 3, RTC, Rally, or Jira. And there's commonalities across these stacks as well. Really, where you see the differences across the stack is in version control and build. The third stack, the Microsoft stack, is for the Windows-based development, the .NET, C# community. They're a breed unto themselves. You have to kind of deal with them separately. Another strategy is to provide governance. So we've come up with a governance structure. It's all capability based. We have a planning product council for the planning tools. We have a build and deploy product council because we think that it's mostly the same people that are interested with the build capability tools and the deploy capability tools. And then we have a test capability council. I also run what's called the integration council, which kind of sits on top of those 3 capability councils. Above that, we have an advisory board, which is comprised of the CIOs from the different business units, as well as the head of my organization, iTech. So anything that we can't solve at the lower product councils, we escalate for decision up to the advisory board. And also our strategy is just lead the way. Drag. You've all heard of the term technical debt. Well, we've kind of come up with the term technical drag. So, there's some folks that you just literally have to drag forward. So, I already said the most amount of divergence that we see internally is in version control, source control, and build. And I think this kind of demonstrates it. One thing I love about Fidelity, as opposed to some of the companies I've worked for in my past, is Fidelity embraces technology. Fidelity loves technology. We did a study. We spend more than any of our competitors on technology. I'm not going to share with you exactly how much more, but it's quite a bit more. And you would think the amount that we spend on technology, that everything would be fully automated, push button deploy, but that's not quite the case. That's where we want to get to, but it's not quite the case yet. So within version control, we are predominantly a clear case shop. There's a significant pocket of subversion. There's still PVCS. We've got GitHub Enterprise. But we also have Gitorious, GitLab. We've got CVS. We even have Microsoft SourceSafe in small pockets still out there. And the build, we're predominantly a BuildForge shop. But there's Bamboo, Antil Pro, the open source Hudson. There's still open source Jenkins. Cruise control, Antil, I already said Antil Pro. So we've got a smattering of just about everything. And remember I said we want to get down to a manageable, integratable, supportable number of tools. And this is really where we want to see the most amount of standardization. So these are the 3 stacks that largely myself and my team have put forth and been promoting. And like I said, we're getting a lot of buy-in and a lot of agreement in converging down to these 3 stacks. The rational stack is really the only one that really addresses both the distributed and the mainframe. And we have plenty of product teams that have applications that span both mainframe and distributed. So this stack serves its purpose. We've got tools that are common. So for code quality, sonar, security, quality, fortify, quality center, you know, the veneer and quality center is starting to be cracked. There are teams and orgs out there that want to find something a little bit newer and leaner. We chose Nexus as our artifact management. We're working to close gaps. So as we look at our ALM portfolio and as we look at all the capabilities that ALM should offer, there are still some gaps that we're working to close. For example, release automation. It's not to say that we don't have release automation solutions at Fidelity. What I'm saying is a standard release automation solution. And IBM Urban Code Deploy is positioned to become that standard. There's a large degree of synergy. A number of business units have already moved forward with Deploy. So my team at Center, we're doing a POC right now. If we can get a good price and you know, we're going to move forward and offer that at Center. Code review tools, here's a couple that we're going to be looking at, but we think that this is a big part of continuous delivery. Test automation, absolutely. And again, this is not to say that there are not test automation tools at Fidelity. There's plenty. But what we want to do is we want to say, we want to get our heads around it, offer some options. If we have to get licensing agreements, tackle that. Offer you know, environments in which to run these tools, come up with chef recipes for installing these tools. So basically put around some process and infrastructure and support around these tools. Because the usage of these tools so far has been kind of on their own. There's really no centralized support of these tools yet. So when we look at CD tools, what we want going forward, the things that we're interested in, of course, are scalability. When you consider a company the size that we are, a tool has to scale. Not only vertically, you know, you have to be able to throw more RAM or more CPUs at a tool and have it to be able to handle that type of scale, but we also look for tools that can scale horizontally. So if we grow a particular server to a certain point and we say, well, okay, now we're ready to set up a separate second instance of that server, we want to be able to move projects and do the pruning or the you know, the separation of projects across those instances. So horizontal scaling is important to us. Of course, multi-tenancy is important. Not only being able to protect who can see what, of course, who can do what comes under security, but we also want to be able to delegate administrative privileges, appropriate administrative privileges, out to that second tier of support. We, you know, at Center need to be able to have overall tool administrative capabilities like root administration, you know, to configure LDAP and configure plugins. But we like to be able to delegate the appropriate level of administration out to that second tier, the local BU administrators, so that they can administer their piece of the pie. Of course, we're interested in high availability. Security is huge. Access appropriate to role, AATR, is an acronym within Fidelity. Everyone knows what it means. The auditors, that's basically their mantra. So we look for tools that integrate with LDAP. We think that's the way to go. And we want scope, role-based scope. We want role-based LDAP groups that we can associate with particular scopings. You remember I mentioned a product model? So we think product line is too broad of a scoping. We think application is too narrow. We think product is just right. So the product is the Goldilocks factor. So when a team comes to us and says, we have to address access within this tool, we raise it up to the product level and try to address access at that product level. Because chances are, if you're a developer on a product team, you want access to all the source code for all the apps in that product. If we need to ratchet it down a level, and for a couple of applications within that product, we need to tighten it up, we can do that because our model accounts for it. We like tools that have REST services, web services, so that we can drive them via automation. We think REST is the way to go. And we think the best strategy for a UI of a tool is a UI that is built upon the REST web services. We want openness. So in terms of extensibility, we think the plugin architectures of the newer tools is great. We want integrations. We love being able to contribute to product roadmaps with working with our vendors. We do care about the product architectures and the database architecture. So some of the tools that we look at, and we look at the databases, and we see that they're storing, compressed XMLs and globs inside, a database at fifth normal form, concerns us because it makes us think, how are you going to manage the evolution of this product with a database implementation like that? So we look at database architecture, we look at product architecture, we care. Of course, we care about regulatory legal requirements in our industry. A lot of the things that we do, the processes that we implement, the controls are all aimed at meeting those requirements. We care about tools that have good reporting capabilities. And don't give us a tool that has no purge, no data archival capability. That's something that should be in version 1.0 of any product launch. Don't tell us it'll come out later, because we've seen those broken promises be made. So our first pilot of continuous delivery happened a couple years ago. We had a program start up in Fidelity. It was called HRAP, and what that stands for is High Risk Asset Protection Program. And what does that mean? So Fidelity is expanding. We have multiple global development centers, GDCs, and we're expanding into countries where we started to say, okay, we've got some applications that we really need to kind of round up and quarantine off. Because even within our firewall, the insider threat is starting to become a little bit greater. So what the HRAP program did is it identified the applications that posed not so much a security threat, but a need to protect at a higher level. A need to protect from internal prying eyes, so to speak. And these apps came from multiple ClearCase implementations, multiple BuildForge, but it gave us an opportunity to build a new SCM environment from the ground up with security in mind, with a very talented set of release engineers who were eager to use the newer breed tools. They were eager to move away from the legacy tools. They wanted to achieve some of the promises of integration and automation. So we looked at Jenkins and found out about CloudBees Jenkins, and it was our initial implementation of CloudBees. Also GitStash. And when folks in Fidelity ask me, well, what is CloudBees Jenkins? My response is, CloudBees is to Jenkins what Red Hat was to Linux. And when I started at Fidelity 8 years ago, we were a Solaris shop in AIX. We didn't have any Linux. Today, we are 99% Linux. And Red Hat was a huge reason of us getting there. I'm going to go into a little bit later some of the enterprise plugins that we've leveraged from the CloudBees offering. Another thing that we did is we moved from Ant to Maven. We implemented Sonar, now called SonarQube. Nexus Pro, took advantage of the staging suite of Nexus Pro. And we also implemented our first stab at a role-based access model. That has further evolved into version 2, which I'll go into. So that experience of establishing that SCM environment for our high-risk assets was our first foray into continuous delivery. I had some slides on how much productivity gains we have achieved. I was asked to remove it, but we've seen significant productivity gains in this environment, mainly around, these newer tools have a more self-service model. They allow you to set things up like templates so that new build jobs can be set up easily in a standard way, in a standard folder structure. And Git and Stash allows developers to work more on a feature branching-based model. We've adopted what's called the Git flow branching model. If it works for the majority, why can't it work for us? Part of the enlightenment that I've mentioned and part of the awakening that we're going through is we at Fidelity have this habit of implementing Fidelity-specific methodologies. We had one called FAM, the Fidelity Agile methodology, one called FISDM, Fidelity System Development Methodology, and even branching models. And I'm trying to change the dialogue, saying, why do we keep doing this? Because all it does is it gives us more of a burden of training, of maintaining all of the documentation around it, of evolving that documentation. Why aren't we leveraging the intellectual property? Why aren't we leveraging, if it works for the rest of the industry, why can't we make it work for us? So now my team is repeating, what's the term, lather, rinse, repeat, what we did for the HRAP apps now at an enterprise level. So we, in first quarter of this year, we did a pilot of GitStash and CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise. We call our service offering Enterprise Stash and Enterprise Jenkins. And we've internally kind of rebranded it as GitStash because Stash is just as much about Git as it is about Stash. I wish the vendor would actually rename it because it clears up so much ambiguity. In any event, for the first 3 months of this year, we carefully selected a control set of applications from across the enterprise. We involved the release engineering teams, the SCM admins from those BUs, where those projects came from. And we used that as an opportunity to collectively learn and refine and harden our our templates, our documentation, our practices, readying for what we call our GA phase, which started on April 1st. So some of the folders that or some of the plugins that we love are the folders, the role-based access control. What those two plugins combined give us essentially is multi-tenancy and the security that we need of tying LDAP groups to scoped-based roles. Build flow is something that we're looking at. Pipeline we are playing around with now. We see great promise in that. Templates is something that we love because in BuildForge we had libraries. Now in Cloud-Based Jenkins we have templates. Artifact management, we still have folks out there that are practicing what I call 20th century practices. We're trying to drag them into the 21st century. They're still checking in their open source jars into the lib directory of their source code repositories. They're still checking in their built binaries back into source control. We want to get out of these habits. A version control, source control repository is not meant for binaries. So we're trying to propagate dependency management and publishing of deployable artifacts, staging of your artifacts for deployment. ALM Access Registry is something that we came up with. It's like version 2 of what I referred to earlier as our role-based access model. We actually have a grid now. For every product, we have a grid. We came up with 7 roles that work across all of our tools. Roles like developer, tester, we have a read-only role, release engineer, ops engineer. So not all the roles apply to all the tools, but the grid satisfies all the roles across all of our ALM tools. And then it's just a matter of plugging in the LDAP group for that product line, for that role, and it serves as our registry. And now we know what LDAP groups need to be audited for membership. People know what LDAP groups they need to request access to via an auditable process to get the type of role-based access that they need for the tools that they'll be using for the applications that they support within the products that they live. So our mantra is, everything should be repeatable, reliable, automate as much as you can. Everybody has a role to play here. Everything in source control, including infrastructure configurations. Maximize visibility. Let everyone see as much about what's going on in the process as possible. Peer reviews, code reviews. That's why we're working to close that code review gap. Simplify, automate. Here's just kind of another view, but look, the key word is automate, 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 automate. And how, I've heard people say that development have their view of the world, operations have their view of the world. Very simplistically speaking, developers want to get their deliverables out on time. Operations want stability and reliability. So there's just a conflict of interest there. The only way that you're going to achieve speed is by ensuring that there's trust. And really the only way to ensure that there's trust is via automation. But it has to be good automation. It's not just automation for the fact of saying we've automated something. It has to be automation that people trust. So that you've got to make sure that everyone understands. This is just another, again, automation, improving visibility. that's basically it. That's the journey that we've been on. That's how my team has been trying to change the dialogue. So thank you very much for your time. Any questions? Yes. Well, we haven't overcome them. It's a constant challenge. Cultural changes, as many of you are aware, is one of the largest challenges. That middle management layer, the permafrost layer, is another challenge. It's just constantly trying to chip away at that. Recognizing who your champions are, especially at the grassroots level, getting some wins in, and then using those teams as your champions to help propagate out within their areas and grow the good practices incrementally. So I mean, it's all about incremental improvements and incremental wins. In some cases, you're taking 3 steps forward, 1 step back. It's just having that energy and that stamina to continuously keep at it. So, which is largely what my team does. And you wouldn't believe the discussions that we get involved in. The one that we're currently involved in is scale. How do we do this at scale, for example? We've got an internal debate going on. We have half of Fidelity saying, no, developers should be picking this up. Developers should learn how to set up their own builds. They should learn how to use these deployment tools and should be setting this up. They should wear that other hat. And then you have the other half saying, this has not worked. Developers don't care about, well, developers care, but it's not their forte. It's not their business to care about repeatability and care about how the builds are set up and how the deployments are set up and doing them in a consistent fashion. So I happen to be on that side of the debate. I happen to be one of the ones saying, where we're seeing pockets of good progress and pockets of good continuous delivery is where we have established competency, where we've established a degree of awareness and education and competency that goes above and beyond what the developers are interested in. I don't care if you call them release engineers, release managers, or I don't care what you call them, but they're a separate breed of people. The best ones, I think, are the ones that have development backgrounds, because then they get the respect from the development community. But what I'm saying is that I think we almost need like a automation implementation team. And I'm not saying add another layer of bureaucracy and make people wait in line for this team. I'm saying get this team going so that they do things in a very templatized, templatized, automated fashion, so that they can do things fast and quick. So it's taking things to that next level. So that's just an example of the constant. It's a constant challenge. You just have to keep chipping away at it. Wow, that's a sound I haven't heard for a decade or more.
Tim, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Great job. Thank you. I'll take that quickly.